yes, we are part of the ACLES certified centers, and happily we recently had the stamp renewed, so that's good news. But anyways, really focusing on today's presentation of this full paper I submitted to be part of these great community of diverse teachers coming from such different backgrounds, and also who are very inspiring to be working with. So I'm presenting a paper that focuses on the teaching of pronunciation, of second language pronunciation, and I'm looking at that aspect from an identitary point of view, embodied in future English teachers. There you go. So Valeria, if you can move on to the next slide. As we are part of the teacher development education stand, right, like section, it is important to keep in mind this fact that teachers seem to be lacking confidence to teach L2 pronunciation based on the literature. And there are several reasons to why is that. Yes, go ahead. Some teachers feel that they have a sense of inadequacy for the job. If you can move on to the next slide. Yeah, so they don't teach that skill, maybe because there's a sense of inadequacy, or they are dissatisfied with their own accent, or they have some limitations when it comes to time. I'm sure we all know what that is, what that looks like in our classrooms, to be lacking time, or some pedagogical or phonological knowledge. So the result of these feelings is that this is a skill that is rarely taught. As Carmen mentioned at the beginning, we rarely discuss this skill, and probably it is because it's rarely taught in the classroom, or it might be. Yeah. However, this is a skill that is intimately linked to listening, for example. And if we go beyond what they reported, what teachers reported to be the reasons why they're not teaching these skills, we should look at the context. And in English learning, in English language teaching, so English considered as a second language, the environment has always promoted the ideal notion of the native speakers to be the perfect models to have in the classroom, right? And this is part of an ideology that touches any second language, really. So to prioritize or to privilege the native speaker as the ideal model. So in that arena, the non-native, where does the non-native teacher stand, or how is that non-native teacher left? With what kind of feelings is that non-native teacher left to be a model for their students? Because the reality is that there are more non-native teachers teaching English than native teachers teaching English. Worldwide, there's a large majority of non-native teachers doing the job. So I focused on them, and you can move on to the next slide. Yeah, so as I said, that the ideal of having a native teacher teaching L2 pronunciation is a deep-rooted belief. It's deeply ingrained in our consciousness. But I looked at social cultural theory, and Also at language teacher identity. So I tried to go beyond the labels of non-native teacher, native teacher. And I found this framework that really highlights the nature of the language teacher identity as a whole, not just looking at his or her origin or their passport. And it is a very dynamic and multi-layered identity that we're talking about. Not at all simplistic, and that is made in many ways from experiences, from emotions too. So my idea for the research study was to take non-native teachers, look at their identities from that experiential and emotional stand. And that's how I put up an instrument to try, an innovative instrument to try to measure those emotional and experiential aspects of the language teacher identity in prospective English teachers in Spain. So you can move on to the next slide. Yeah, go ahead. So I guess one of the innovations from this research study was that emotions and lived experiences are typically studied from a qualitative point of view. So I tried to come up with items that could measure that in different ways, and at the same time could answer these three research questions. How does it feel to speak my second language? How does my second language accent feel? And what would my pronunciation instruction in my second language look like? Yeah, go ahead. So I administered this survey to 71 pre-service teachers that were in their last year of their primary education degree, and they were doing the specialization of English. The survey was written in Spanish, and these were the types of items it had. And I'm going to exemplify what they looked like. Go ahead, move on to the next slide. So for example, the semantic differential scale or items had two opposites at each end of a scale. For example, to measure the construct of ownership, so really that is the degree to which a speaker felt their L2 pronunciation was an integrated part of themselves, I had an imitation at one end and then part of me at the other end. And they had to pick the degree, to which they felt identified. Move on. Yeah, next. For example, we had this other construct of accent experience. And for this one, I wanted to see how they would position themselves confronted to an experience that was described as, when I speak my second language, I feel like wearing or having a passport on my front head, or having a passport with multiple stamps. Obviously, the first one is associated with a stigma versus the second one, which is probably a source of pride to have a passport filled with stamps, filled with experiences and different experiences themselves. Yeah, go ahead. Then I also had items that allowed participants to pick one or two metaphors that best describe their experience when speaking their second language. Some options were like, I feel at home when I speak my second language. I feel like an actor. I feel like a chameleon, yeah, for example. You can move on to the next slide. And then I also had a type of item in which they had to choose one between two statements to see if there was clearly an identity shift or not. So when speaking the second language, I feel like I am the same person, or I behave and think differently when I speak my second language. There you go. In order to do the data analysis, I use Graphics, which is, I guess, a beginner's level type of data software. And I did descriptive, descriptive and inferential statistics. When I did the descriptive statistics, I really paid attention to whether or not the answers, the results were in the range and how distributed the answers were. And then there is a mistake here. It's not Pearson, it's Pearson. Sorry, I'll write that down for the sake of clarity. It's Pearson product. So I've made, so there are some typos here. Pearson product, Pearson product moment correlations. I'll put that correctly in the chat for everyone to have, Pearson products. There you go. So you can move on to the first findings. So there's a stable self. A large majority of participants reported reported that they felt like themselves, like there was not a change in identity. They felt like they were the same person, basically. Yeah. But then when we look at the items that allowed them to pick different metaphors to describe their experience when speaking a second language, there was about 40% of people that actually picked a combination, because they could pick one metaphor or two metaphors, and 40% of the participants, they prefer to pick a combination of both. And in that combination, the option that was widely picked was a different version of myself, yeah, but also at home. So they feel at home, they feel comfortable speaking their second language. It's just they feel they are a different version of themselves. So here we can confirm that multi-layered nature of the language teacher identity when it comes also to teaching a second language. And you can move on to the next finding. Here, it's a complex matrix, but I will just, bring your attention to those areas that are yellow at the very extremes, like the lower bottoms corner and the top bottom left corner, because these are correlations, positive correlations. So confidence, here we go. Let's see if I can. I looked at my own papers. Yeah. So confidence correlated with ownership, clearly. Yeah. So feeling that your second language accent or pronunciation is part of yourself was related to a high level of confidence. Significantly, that same high level of confidence was also positively correlated to teaching likelihood. So if I feel confident, I will most likely teach pronunciation in the future with a 0.24 correlation, a number or figure. Then looking at the negative correlations, and those are the blue shaded areas, you can see how feeling like an imitation, feeling that your accent is an imitation, feeling that your accent is limiting, it is negatively. So the more you feel like it is an imitation, the less relaxed you are. The less relaxed you are, the less confidence you have, or the lesser L2 accent perception you show. So that's why there are two profiles that emerge from my findings. These confident speaker profile, and the one that feels like inauthentic, like another person, an imitation, or limiting. You can move on to the next. And I particularly, within those correlations, thought that these two variables was really worth it to show here, because the more you feel the accent, the L2 accent, as part of yourself, the more confidence you have. And confidence was related to the likelihood for teaching L2 pronunciation. So moving on to the next slide, I'm making some recommendations, and these are to integrate for any pedagogical approach that targets the teaching of pronunciation in the second language, to integrate new identities within the larger self, and not as opposed to the person you are in the first language. And also to avoid using conventional labels such as non-native or native, to use other labels such as experts, that are not so simplistic and allow for more individuality and empowerment in this area of teaching. And there's a last slide. And I do thank sincerely the LL conference to have me here, and especially Valeria, because she has accompanied me from the very beginning, has been really helpful, and I value her professionalism and assistance with everything. Thank you, everybody.
And thank you, Adriana. Thank you, Adriana, for being so